Welcome to the Values Exchange podcast. I'm Mike Cruz, your host, author of Saturday Every Day, private pilot, and CEO of North Texas Wealth Management, a firm dedicated to values-based financial planning. In this episode, we're discussing the value of difficult conversations. Have you ever experienced a conversation that you're avoiding? And you know that the only way to move forward is to have that difficult conversation, but you choose not to. Today, we have a special guest, an expert in, giving advice on having those difficult conversations. He's had 25 years in multiple industries and is the CEO and founder of Exceptional CEO Solutions. Neil Katz is here with me, so thanks for being here, Neil.
Well, thank you so much. I look forward to having maybe a difficult conversation today.
That's it. So, I thought about it. I was like, is this going to be a difficult podcast, or are we just talking about difficult conversations?
I think we'll go with the second option. We'll hold difficult conversations for after this.
Right. So, I think across industries, we've had a lot of experience, executive coaching, HR solutions, and I think for a lot of us, we know that there's this conversation to be had, whether it's, something to do with, someone's pay or a performance, and we kind of avoid it, just human nature. What's been your experience with working with executives and coaching them? What have you seen as kind of the roadblocks?
I think the common roadblocks is people just don't want to do it. They're the fear of confrontation. I think it's having that conversation and not knowing what to expect, what the outcome is. It's difficult to predict people. How do we know what they're going to say? How do we know what they're going to think? What if they do this or this or this? So we get this fear of, I don't know what's going to happen. So instead of addressing the performance, the conduct, the behavior, the outcome, whatever it may be, we just avoid it. Our answer is let's just skip that conversation. And you know what? Our great solution is it's just going to go away.
Right.
That never happens.
So what about the hidden cost of avoiding that conversation? What have you found as kind of the financial or cultural impact to the company?
Financial can be somewhat hard to quantify at times to say the dollar impact is X, but I can say it decreases productivity. It derails the team environment, derails your culture. And here's the thing. Everybody on the team generally knows that person's not either the right fit, they're not performing well, something's wrong with them. And instead of having the conversation, we avoid it, which now is causing not just an individual or individuals, it's potentially impacting an entire team. Mm-hmm. And now you have a lower performing team. And when you have that happen, it's having a very clear, quantifiable impact on the business.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes as a leader of an organization, you're trying to create a certain culture. And sometimes that culture is, hey, we all get along, right? And so the last thing I want to do is bring up a difficult conversation or confrontation, right, and then make it maybe potentially more comfortable for everybody. And so in the essence, have you found that leaders are trying to protect their culture by avoiding conflict?
Yes. The short answer is yes. We see this all the time is, you know what, if I don't address it, we have a great team. We work well together. This person's struggling with this or that. I don't want to disrupt things because we have a great team. It's just this one person. And you know what? It'll get better. You know what? Just give them a little more time. They have 13 reasons why this is happening to them. Not sure they really do, but we can justify anything.
Yeah.
And what I always say is don't justify it, address it. And to be honest, people want difficult conversations. And I challenge people to ask themselves this question. If you go back and look at the last 10 difficult conversations you had, and you had the idea of what was going to happen, and most of them I can paint some pretty scary scenarios of what we thought was going to happen. Out of those last 10, how many of them actually happened the way you thought?
Mm-hmm. And what you feared, right? It usually doesn't happen.
Guess what? Probably 9 out of 10 never happened. What we have is an experience. Mm-hmm. And our experience create our beliefs drive our actions drive our results or outcomes. So either I change your experience and create a new positive experience, or you're going to hold on to that for weeks, months, years, or your entire career. So what I would say is don't let one bad experience create a culture of who you are as a leader to say, I'm not going to address it. I would challenge you to ask yourself how many were good.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's good advice. And so, kind of gearing up for that conversation. So let's say that you're my executive coach and I tell you about a situation and I'm like, man, I really want to avoid it. You told me to address it. So going into that conversation, what would be your advice beforehand to kind of mentally prepare for taking that leap?
I'll give you the analogy. If you've ever played any sport or done anything, what do? You practice, you practice, you practice, right?
Okay.
Just like a sport. So like this conversation, get a good executive coach and practice with them. And don't practice like, oh, I don't know what they're going to. I actually, what I call real play with my coachees.
Okay.
And I'm like, you become the employee, I'll become you. I want to talk to you today about this. And they're like, and you know how they're going to respond, right? Or you think you know. So I'll let you play that out. And we go back and forth and we practice. Then we switch chairs. I become the employee. You stay as the leader. And we practice again. Practice, practice, practice. The only way you build any muscle stronger is practice.
Okay.
So just like a good, difficult conversation, the more you practice, the more you become equipped and prepared, the less anxiety, the less stress you're going to have. Look, nobody can predict exactly how somebody's going to respond in a scenario. You practice it and you work through contingents like this, and this, then you just go forward with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good. And I think, with technology now, with AI kind of at the forefront of everything, there's this idea of like creating personas and using it for training. Have you seen anything where people use maybe AI as a conversation of creating kind of this persona of the employee that's struggling, and then you say, okay, let me practice with AI where the stakes are low?
I have seen it in a limited case.
Okay.
We're starting to see more of that.
Okay.
I will tell you the one that I've seen, and I had a conversation with a colleague of mine. They use Grok, which is X's AI.
Okay.
And Grok is very good with natural language. And they use Grok and said, I have an employee who's XYZ, ABC, here's the persona, here's all of this, here's the situation I need to talk, help me walk through it. And they did a pretty good job with it.
Okay.
Just recognize it's AI. So there is limits to what it knows today. 10 years from now, that will be your new executive coach. You will log on to whatever device you're in and say, AI, I want to talk to you about ABC. Can you help me through this? Oh, sure. We'll walk through this, and this. And they'll go back and forth. And candidly, it'll probably be a better conversation than anybody else because they have the infinite knowledge and wisdom of everything you've fed it for 10 years.
Yeah.
Not sure it's there yet. I think we're still in the early phases, but I will tell you it's coming.
Yeah. I always think it's fascinating that one of the takeaways from AI is to help us be better humans, have those difficult conversations. And maybe it's just about getting the reps in, like you said, getting that practice before you kind of go in for the big game.
Look, at the end of the day, it's our job, it's our responsibility and our accountability as leaders to have those difficult conversations. And candidly, the analogy, I'll give another one that really hit home with me many years back, which is, what's the worst case scenario of this conversation that you want to have? And what I would ask is, before you answer the question, I'll add one caveat to that. What's the realistic worst case scenario?
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is the person going to scream and yell and rant and run out of the room? Maybe. I can tell you in the 25 plus years I've been doing this, I've had that happen once.
Okay.
You might think it's real, and it might be real, but the chances are highly limited. Mm-hmm. Are they going to get emotional? Are they going to cry? Are they going to raise their voice? Are they going to be angry? Are they going to shut down? Those are a little bit more realistic scenarios, but be realistic of what's the worst case that could happen with this person, and then go from there. Don't go down this path of crazy, unrealistic outcomes, because 9 times out of 10, that's never going to happen.
Doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
So, a lot of times we build that up to be, bigger, and the anxiety is bigger than the actual experience.
Exactly.
Everybody feels better when that conversation's
right.
over. So I noticed on your blog, you write about poor performance, and rarely it happens in isolation. So what are the early signs that somebody's that maybe underperforming, and how do you address that early enough? How do you recognize it, address it before it becomes kind of the toxic culture?
think the key to poor performance is simple. What is the expectation and is it clear? And more importantly, does the person understand what is the measure of success? So if you ask anybody in your team today, and I challenge any person listening to your podcast and
Yeah.
talking to this, go up to one of your people and say, how do I measure how effective or successful you are in this role? You're going to be very surprised by, I'm going to tell you my guess is 30 to 60% of your team won't know that answer. So the first thing before you address poor performance, make sure people understand what is the performance expectations, what's the measure of success. Once you understand that, the number one thing after that is follow up, follow through, consistent one-on-ones.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you, don't wait for the performance to be so egregious that it should have been addressed weeks, months, years ago. I have companies I'll walk into and they're like, I need you to talk to Bob. I'm like, okay, what's going on with Bob? He's not a good performer. Okay, well, how long has Bob been at? Bob's hitting his 21st anniversary. Excuse me?
Right.
21 years. Well, we just haven't been able to address it. He was one of our early employees in 21 years. But I'm going to tell you, when Bob starts achieving success or decides to exit the company, it's amazing what shifts you see in an organization when people start holding people accountable. And by the way, not many people I know wake up in the morning, and I can tell you this, I don't think anybody on your podcast listening woke up this morning and said, my goal today is to do a bad job.
Right.
We don't. So we just need to give them the understandings, expectations, and measure of success, and don't wait. Worst thing you could do is wait to address performance.
Yeah. So either the expectations aren't clear, and you find that to be the most common.
I would say the most common is it's lack of clarity of expectation. And then the other thing is, can they do the job?
Okay.
Many of times we elevate people in their roles, especially in small to medium-sized companies. Somebody started as an individual contributor and they're your best employee. And now you make them a manager.
Yeah.
Then you make them a director.
Yeah.
And they're great and they're awesome and you don't want to lose them. But the reality is, they're really not a manager or director. They've never had training. They don't have experience, but yet we've given them this role and responsibility and accountability, but we've never really selected the right person for the role.
Right. Or they didn't get the training that they needed to make the leap. I've seen that quite a bit as, a financial planner. We help people retire. And a lot of our clients are engineers or work at Fortune 500 companies. And it's funny because they're phenomenal engineers. They're so great. They get promoted and now they're managing a whole group of engineers and it's a completely different skill set. And a lot of times the companies don't have the time or they're just not focused on how do I take this great engineer and make them a great engineering manager.
Right.
Which are two different skill sets. And so they end up being miserable and they just go, I just want to go back to working with things. I don't want to work with people.
The number one thing we see is just because you have a top performer, it doesn't make them a manager. Yeah. So be very cautious of who you select. And the last thing I would say, and you kind of alluded to this, I wish we could all agree we don't have time to train and develop our talent ourselves. We might say I'm going to train them up to be a great leader manager. I would ask you, how much time do you really have every week to really sit there and work with them one-on-one, week over week, month over month, year over year? Reality is maybe an hour a week if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So be careful and cautious. And if you wanted to grow them and develop them, let them shadow others, let them experience others, let them have a buddy mentor that they can really go to and ask all those silly questions to that they won't ask their boss.
That's good advice. So when you talk about like your organization, I was looking on the website, kind of this fractional HR solutions or executive coaching. Is that kind of that role? Do you have where instead of, if I don't have time to spend with everybody to mentor, you just basically outsource the mentoring?
Yes. And we call it executive coaching.
Okay.
Exactly. Same analogy. And we do this all the time. I mean, I generally will have 2 to sometimes 5 to 8 leaders who are mentoring and coaching. And here's the reason why. I have anywhere from an hour to 3 hours of paid time dedicated to that individual. And my only goal is to help them succeed. And it's interesting the questions they bring to the table and the things they struggle with. But I work with them one-on-one, not just to work through that, but build those muscles as we talked about earlier today and strengthen that experiences to have those difficult conversations or just how to celebrate people, how to recognize strengths, how to be a better leader of not their operational or their background, but the people component. The people component is the hardest part of any company I've seen.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. We're just very, we all have different belief systems, different values, different talents, and how do you really utilize that? And a lot of times I found that even people on the team you think that would be really happy in their role have these hidden talents that they're not happy because they're not getting to use all of their skills. And they go, I'm artistic and I don't get to use that at work. And so I started asking that in an interview question of, if you come on board here as a team member, what's some of those talents you want to make sure don't get lost, right? And we want to fully utilize all of your skills. So, let's talk about it up front. It's kind of fascinating to hear that.
I have to tell you, that's amazing. And I wish more companies would do that, because if you unlock the talent, the true talent of what your people love, their heart, their passion, their drive, you can take somebody that's a mid-level, maybe a few years of experience. They'll outpace half your team because they love what they're doing, and they'll put in all the time, energy, effort. They'll go outside, they'll learn, they'll listen to podcasts, they'll go online and take additional trainings because it's their love.
Yeah.
And when you truly set somebody into their love and their passion, and you just honestly get out of their way, you got lightning in a bottle, is how I like to call it.
Lightning in a bottle. I like that. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty impactful. I think a long time ago I read, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey, and I really like him as an author. And one of the things that he said was, really treating your employees like volunteers, because they volunteer their talents, their strengths. You can watch the clock, you can try to manage all of the results, but to get that true passion and talent, they volunteer that.
Sure.
Right. And I always found that kind of going back, and so you're grateful when they do their job, not because, well, you just did your job, I expected. It's, well, thank you for doing a great job. And treating them like volunteers has always been kind of that mantra. Do you have a mantra that you kind of go back to of how you frame how to treat employees?
I think treat employees like they want to be treated. So one of the things is, I love the mantra of the volunteer. It's a good analogy to get you to think, but I will challenge you to say, dig in deeper and understand each individual person on your team. So it's relative to the size of your teams and your leaders. But when you truly understand your people and what they value, the example I'll give you, I have a gentleman on my team, was out of town for his daughter's volleyball tournament. And when he came back, we happened to talk, I think it was a couple of days ago. And the first question I asked, he's like, well, let me ask you this. I said, hold on. How was the trip? How did it go? Did your daughter win? How was that? He's like, it was good. And you heard this pause, like, oh, he remembered.
Yeah.
Connect with people on where they value, what they value in their lives and their work, before we go straight into the work, assignments, tasks, checklists, outcomes. Get to know them to a degree as people and what's important to them, what's needed for them. Because when you connect with them on a personal level and you get to know them as a person, not just as an employee, you'll win every day.
Yeah. That's really, it's a good way to think about it, right? Yeah. And connect. So for our listeners, if there was one thing right now, perhaps everybody listening can think of a conversation, maybe it's just asking for a raise, or maybe it's their employee, or, the business culture isn't what they think it should be. So if they're thinking about a difficult conversation that needs to be had, what would be your advice for how do they go lean into that and not steer away from it?
First, just do it. First thing I would say is just do it. Pick a date. By this date, I'm going to have my conversation. Hold yourself accountable. And if not, get a friend, colleague, a boss to say, look, my accountability partner is, I'm going to have this conversation in the next 2 weeks. I need you to help me. Okay. Hold me accountable. Second, practice. Just practice. Look, it might not go ideal, but just like anything in our careers, nothing goes perfect. How do we learn? We reflect. We take away. After that conversation, go back and ask yourself how to go, what was wrong, what didn't you like, what do you want to change? But most importantly, don't forget what went right. Not every conversation was horrible. We are very critical of ourselves as individuals and employees. Stop, find both the balance between what was good and what wasn't good, and learn from that, and then go back at it again.
Yeah.
Nothing's perfect. I've been doing this 25 years. I learn it every single day, and people still surprise me.
Okay.
But I've learned from every conversation I've had, and I will learn from every conversation still forward. How do I become a better communicator, a better listener? How do I understand them and support them? But practice, 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 and have the conversation.
Yeah. So when you coach leaders and you say, how important is it to be candid? How do you explain like the value of just that trait for a leader?
A lot of times it's hard for leaders to understand it. So I ask them for an example in their career. Tell me a time when you had a leader or boss that was candid with you. What happened? Was it good? Was it bad? Why? What did it mean to you? What was the impact to you in your career? And how did that change you? When you give them that thought of going back in their history to say, I had this great boss who was very candid with me. Honestly, didn't like what he said at first, but you know what I reflected on and what I recognized was I just needed that.
Yeah.
I have a great leader still to this day. Will never forget the conversation. I was wanting to be promoted. And I went up to him and he's like, you know what, Mr. Katz, all you're focused on is your promotion. Why don't you be the best person you can be in this role? And then the career promotions will come. And I was livid. I was just very upset with him. And I was about to quit. I was very like, I'm better than this. And I want to be promoted. And you know what happened? I had two choices, leave or listen. And about a day or two later, I finally said, you know what? I like this company. I like what it's about. I'm going to listen. It was a choice I consciously made. Yeah. And I dug in, focused on my career, what I was doing in my role, becoming the very best individual in that role. 9 months later, he calls me and goes, Mr. Katz, congratulations on your promotion. Now, the timing was, it could have been 9 months, it could have been 9 years. Yeah. It didn't matter. What was matter to me was it was a difficult conversation. I didn't want to hear it. But the candidness is what I needed because he got my attention and he made me make a choice in myself, stay or go. And I stayed and I did exactly what he said, listened. And it was the best conversation I've had, one of the best in my career.
Yeah, it's amazing. I had the opportunity to meet the author, Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great and all types of books. A great author, but it was interesting. He shared his experience with his mentor, which was Peter Drucker, written, I don't even know how many books after the age of 80 in business. But it was interesting because he kind of had that same conversation early in his career. He was trying to, he was really worried about being successful. And Peter Drucker looked at him and said, look, quit trying to be successful and just try to be useful. And it really shaped what he said was it really shaped his whole career, his whole focus. And so sometimes that's the candid moment he goes back to look at, that direction. But somebody that really is such a great author and leading, everyone else now and, an author of all the leadership books, I thought that was fascinating. It was just that one conversation kind of headed a different direction.
You'd be surprised how many of us have had those conversations in our careers that if we pause for a moment and you're sitting in your car this next week driving somewhere, think about that conversation and ask yourself two things. One, am I still using that advice? And two, did I go back and recognize and celebrate the person that gave it to me? Be still to this day, go back and tell them how much it means to you because this gentleman, this had to be 15, 18 years ago. And he knows, but now that I've said it to you today, I'll probably be reaching out to him at some point and go, hey, I was thinking about you. I just want to say hi and tell you thanks for everything you did in my career and my growth and my journey.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is. And I think sometimes the person giving the advice doesn't even really realize the impact to your point. I had a professor that gave me some great advice. I wrote him and I think he didn't even remember saying it, but I was like, it was so impactful. And then, I was thinking of it the other day. I actually had the opportunity to thank one of my clients and I was, early in my career, but I had, just had, kids and I was like, I need to get on a nonprofit board. And, I was just being ambitious and he was like, not yet, like just focus on your family, kids, it goes fast. Kids grow up fast. There'll be plenty of time for that later. I was like, wow, that was, it kind of set me back and like lightning. And it was like, that's really great advice. And so I did. I kind of took a step back, focused on the family, and he couldn't have been more right.
Right.
My kids are going off to college here, and so I'm glad I had that extra time, family time. So, and I think it's the willingness to listen, right?
Listen, but listen to what you might not believe at first. People challenge you And when they challenge you, that's our growth. Those are the moments. If you look at your career, my favorite question I'll ask people is, think of the most challenging, difficult time in your career. When you look at that moment and then you reflect on it, ask yourself, isn't that the same moment you grew the most, you developed the most? I don't mean career levels, but your growth is professional. That's when we grow. When we're stretching ourselves, we are better than we used to be. It's the challenging, difficult times that stretch us to make us who we are today.
Yeah.
So embrace those moments. They're scary, they're challenging, they're difficult. But when you reflect years later, it was the best advice. Support time in your career. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah. And I think, when we talk about these difficult conversations, do you think it's harder to give, I guess, that advice, or do you think it's harder to receive?
Ironically, it's both.
Yeah.
It
It really is a difficult conversation.
They're difficult because let's be real. The person giving it, it's hard for them. It's hard for the person to hear it. You hope that they're open. You hope that they listen. You hope they embrace it. Not all will, but that's not a choice you get to make. As the person giving it, your choice is to give it. It's up to the individual whether they receive it or not. And you can't control that. So stop trying to control things you can't. Focus on what you can, which is providing that feedback, that advice, have that difficult conversation and see what happens.
Yeah.
It's up to the individual to make their choice as well.
Okay, so let's get into like the actual execution of this. So let's say that we're going to have a difficult conversation, and I'll be the one giving the advice.
Okay.
Dare not ask what I need to improve. But no, if I'm going to have that conversation with you, should I preface it with, hey, kind of like, I want to give you some advice. You're going to be resistant to this. You may not like it, but I want you to hear it.
Sure.
Is it better to open it up that way, or is it better just to be direct, or do you try to kind of diffuse it before you give the advice?
I don't diffuse it, and here's why.
Okay.
When you diffuse it, you're assuming things. You just said, I have some difficult things. I want to give advice you're going to resist. How do you know I'm going to resist it?
Yeah.
You don't. And I'm going to pick on just your words and what you said, because people do this all the time. I'm like, why do you assume I'm going to resist? I might embrace this. I might be like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting for this. Thank you so much. Or it might be, yeah, you're right. They might. You don't know. And I always say, I don't care how good you are. Nobody can predict exactly. What I would say is just be honest and candid. Look, I want to discuss something with you, which is difficult for me as your leader, but I want to share this with you. How you respond is your choice, but I want to be there as a partner to help you in this journey. So let me give you some feedback.
Okay.
Notice I took it upon myself as the leader to take accountability. It's difficult for me to have this conversation with you, Mike, but I want to share this with you. Afterwards, you can come back to you and say, Mike, what are your thoughts now? How do you, and you might say, I need some time to think through this. Okay. Yeah. Or check back in a few days. Mike, how did it go? I know that conversation for me was difficult. How did it work for you? Did it help you, support you, or did it make you something different? Notice I didn't fill in what it was. I didn't say, did it make you angry or sad? Or be careful putting words in people's mouths. Great. Let them describe themselves. Open the door and the conversation.
Yeah. Well, the verdict's out. It was way easier for me to try to give you advice than to hear the truth.
It's hard. It is hard.
I need to do a better job.
That's all right. We'll work after this podcast.
Right. Get the practice reps.
Exactly.
No, that's really good. So when people say blunt honesty kills morale, you think that's true or false?
I think blunt honesty could kill morale the way you use the word blunt. Blunt is very direct. I'm not saying soften it, but make it real to the person. Remember, we care for people. I don't like the word blunt. I think honest feedback will not kill morale. I think direct feedback will not kill morale. Blunt, I think, is just very matter of fact. You failed at this. That's factual. Okay. I don't think it's very supportive of the individual.
Yeah.
So I think the word blunt is what's throwing me off.
So it's kind of the idea that you really care, and maybe how you say it is as important as maybe what you say.
It's always important of how you say what you say to people, because they're going to hear how you feel and what you made them feel. If you make them feel supportive and cared for, but it's still honest and direct feedback, and you'll get much better results out of that than being blunt and direct.
No, I like that. And so what about these anonymous tools? So let's say that I'm maybe wanting to get some feedback. How am I doing as a manager? How am I doing as a leader? Should I do an anonymous feedback tool, or is it better to ask for that face-to-face?
You asked a question that I love. It's one of my favorite topics, which is I am not a fan of anonymous tools.
Okay.
Look, we need to create an environment for our employees to give us honest, direct feedback. And if we haven't, we need to look in the mirror first.
Okay.
Don't do anything else but ask yourself, why is my team not being honest and direct? Now, word of caution, if you go back to your offices today and you go to your team and say, I want honest, direct feedback, and you haven't never asked them or it's been years, they're not going to give you honest, direct feedback. They don't believe you. They don't trust you right now.
Yeah.
Build that rapport and trust with them. They'll be honest and direct. But celebrate that feedback they give you. Because if you get resistant, they're going to resist back.
Yeah. No, I would agree. And, I think you said the key word, which is trust. And sometimes it's really hard if trust has been broken for whatever reason, maybe just unintentionally over time. And then you want to have that conversation, right? Maybe it's not well received because there's no trust. Right. So what would be your advice in that situation where, maybe, you said there was going to be a raise and there wasn't one because circumstances changed. They felt like they can't trust you anymore. And now you have to have the performance conversation. Things can get really, really difficult.
Sure.
What's your advice when their kind of trust has been eroded?
Remember, trust was built over time. It could be lost in a moment, but it can be rebuilt. So build trust, be honest and transparent with your folks. And trust is a factor that there are a limited number of exceptions, so we won't get into that. But I'd say 95% of the time, if trust is eroded, rebuild it. It's just like building a broken dam. You don't just go, well, it broke, I can't fix it. What are you going to do? You're going to try to rebuild it and make it better and figure out ways to strengthen it. Same thing with your relationship with your team. If you've lost trust or they've lost trust in you, it's your job as a leader and try to rebuild it. It might take longer, it might be harder, but you can do it if you choose. You have to make that choice to say, as a leader, I'm going to rebuild trust with my team.
Yeah. And maybe just that difficult conversation of being honest that I know I've broken that trust and I'm going to try to rebuild.
Exactly. Yeah. Candid conversations are so important.
It's powerful. Yes. So I like the quote of, basically growth lives on the other side of the conversation you're avoiding. And many times I find that to be true. So our action steps for our listeners, maybe the challenge this week. So identify one overdue conversation, whether it's a peer, partner, direct report, and then schedule it.
Exactly.
And even if you're not ready to say anything perfectly, just, maybe practice in the mirror, practice with a mentor, get somebody to help you, and then just show up and have the conversation.
Practice, and do it. Yeah. You know what? It's not going to go as bad as you think, generally speaking. Look, practice. And if not, reach out.
Yeah. So Exceptional HR Solutions. Tell me a little bit about what your company offers and where people can find you.
Sure. So Exceptional HR Solutions, we're a fractional HR services company. We support clients throughout the United States in all industries, small to medium-sized clients, and we offer fractional services in the HR arena. So we'll be their HR team, their HR partner, so they don't have to. And again, we'll be that partner to help them through those conversations, those challenges. We want leaders to get back to what they love to do, and generally, they don't have the expertise in HR that we do. We have 450 years combined experience in my team. We have a team of over 20 great practitioners that just do an amazing job, and we're there to help them get back to their superpowers. That's our goal.
It's great. I love it.
You can find me at exceptionalhrsolutions.com on the web, on LinkedIn. Drop me a note, email, inquiry, whatever you need. We're here to help.
Nice. Well, thanks, Neil. Thanks for being here. Appreciate that. So thanks for tuning in into this episode of the Values Exchange. Hopefully you'll lean in, have that difficult conversation, and find your superpower. Thank you.